Hello to everyone and the internet. Welcome to Friday, maggots, February 1st. I am Nathan of Washington. You are watching The Young Globalist. And this is the news in 2019. Alright, everybody. So, House Dems deny bill that would redact raises in pay for sex abuse. So, basically, the Republicans have proposed a bill to deny pay raises to federal employees accused of sexual harassment. Accused, mind you. Not convicted, accused. Means you could be completely innocent, but because you were accused... Yeah, basically. This was a move for some real change in the federal government. But the Dems shut it down, however. It did pass a full House vote, though. And it will be voted on in the Senate. The proposal failed with just 206 congressmen voting for it, including 17 Democrats and 1 Republican, among the Republican minority. Now, here's the thing. My problem with this is the fact that all you need to do is be accused. And when you understand that it is more moral to pay more knowledge than the butterfly effect than it is to be good or evil, right? Understand the greater effect of your actions here. Think about this. And this is not a difficult scenario to grasp. With pay raises like that, you're denying the opportunity of a potentially innocent person either A, to survive during hard times where they might need that raise, or B, even donate that raise to a crucial charity. You are denying an opportunity for a lot of, positive outcomes for someone who's, only merely accused. I would have voted yes to that bill if with one slight alteration being that if they were convicted of sexual harassment, like actual full-on confirmation, which I realize is difficult to establish, but better that the guilty go free than one innocent man get falsely accused. That's always been the thought process in the American justice system, to some extent. Of course, paradigms have changed. Equal justice is pretty much dead in this country. We no longer make the punishment fit the crime. In fact, we over-punish for the crime. And that is a crime in of itself. Still, the point is, this was at least an attempt for genuine change in the federal government over sexual abuse scandals. And the Democrats, of all people, who are supposedly in support of this kind of thing, shut it down. Obviously, because they're more concerned with appearances than actual change. Down syndrome Frank Stevens says that if he were born today, Democrats would have had him aborted. Yeah, I would say that's probably true. There is an ableist agenda against Down syndrome and autism. And if you're not familiar with what ableists are, basically ableists are people who think that the lives of people with supposed mental handicaps are intrinsically less valuable than those without. I would call that attitude a mental handicap. That's literally how Hitler and his Nazis thought. Pretty much. Of course, today's not about autism. This is about Down syndrome. And like I said, he's not entirely wrong, as there's been invented a screening process that can reveal Down syndrome present in the fetus, in its neurological tissue, or however the hell that works. And it can sometimes be found in the DNA of the mother, like a recessive gene in the mitochondrial DNA. Because basically Down syndrome is a mutation. It's a somewhat negative mutation And the underlying cause is not fully known of how this mutant gene comes about, but it is nonetheless a mutation. But while it may seem somewhat negative, it's not particularly harmful. And people with Down syndrome are perfectly capable of living very decent lives. Although frequently they have a hard time controlling their body weight and BMI ratio and all that. But Frank Stevens might have gone a little too far in comparing the trend to the final solution, which was Hitler's final plan for the Jews. He said, quote, "No one knows more about life with Down syndrome than I do. Please remember this, I'm a man with Down syndrome and my life is worth living," he said. This was Frank Stevens' quote. Further, he quoted, "The people pushing this particular final solution," there he goes, "are saying that people like me should not exist. The view is deeply prejudiced by an outdated idea of life with Down syndrome. Seriously, I have a great life." It's an exaggeration to some extent. The ableists' agenda against Down syndrome is sort of a misguided sense of benevolence. They genuinely believe that you can't have a good life with Down syndrome, and they think they're being merciful. Which, of course, is nonsense. I don't really think it's so much as a final solution as he's suggesting, as more like that, the reason why I think these screenings to reveal Down syndrome was invented was just so that the mother knows that their child will have Down syndrome. And that much I agree with. I think that any parent, a woman, a mother, should have the right to know if their child is going to have some kind of mental condition, right? Something to be aware of so they're ready to deal with it when the time comes. And unfortunately, they're abusing that screening process and using it as an excuse to get an abortion. They were just going to abort that thing anyway, as far as I'm concerned, and they're just using that it had Down syndrome as an excuse. It paints a target on the unborn baby's back, so to speak. It just makes it an easy target, but they probably wanted an abortion anyway. So they're inordinately targeted because it's easier to get away with without being shamed by greater society. You see what I'm saying? So there is a definite bias against people with Down syndrome. Now, my experiences with Down syndrome individuals is they're either really sad or really happy all the time. Like, there's no in between. They're not even tempered at all. But beyond that, they're perfectly capable of learning, absorbing information, acquiring wisdom, and living a perfectly decent, productive, happy life. Perfectly capable. Within certain confined limits, their existence is going to be more limited than someone without Down syndrome. It is an emotional handicap, at most. It is mostly an emotional handicap. And while the physical manifestations of it do make you look kind of funny, there are plenty of Down syndrome people with healthy, romantic, and even sexual relationships. So it's not a significant hindrance in any way to their livelihood, in my opinion. Like, it's not a significant impact. So this inordinate, attitude against Down syndrome seems to me like something that's really stupid and incredibly shallow. So, there's my opinion on that. Still, nonetheless, I would agree with Mr. Stevens that to some extent Democrats would have him aborted if he were born today. Just our reasoning on that is different. It is not so much a campaign against people with Down syndrome as it's just easier to get away with without shaming because the fetus has Down syndrome. Anyway, moving on to our final story today, short episode. Sarah Huckabee Sanders says that God wanted Trump to be president. Evangelicals love Trump. Very true. Because I don't know what it is with just this eternal, like, tie between the classic Republican-style conservatism and Christianity. Well, historically speaking, because conservative America was mostly, if not entirely Christian. Like, they go on about freedom of religion, but they don't truly respect it. They never have. But, God want to be president? No. People wanted Trump to be president. Because, see, that's how democracy works. So unless God voted for Trump, I mean... there's my little joking anecdote. But yeah, no, these evangelicals, they love Trump. They're capable of criticizing some of his decisions, but they're otherwise in love with him because he's just the most conservative the most conservative president we've seen in a long time. Possibly the most conservative ever, which I would agree. I'm a moderate conservative. I don't really go too far into the conservative world of thinking. I'm perfectly capable of reaching a middle ground with the libs and compromising. Unfortunately, however, the liberals have been the liberal ideology has been the leading ideology in politics for some time now, since the 70s. Thanks to presidents such as John Fitzgerald Kennedy and his successor, Lyndon Baines Johnson. And unfortunately, in the beginning, liberalism was great. Certain mistakes that the conservatives had made in the past were being corrected. But liberalism went too far. With the toxic feminism and all these abortions and all this other, too much freedom. They went too far the other way. And you know what, at this point I say, it's time to resurrect conservative America. We'll keep all the good changes liberalism brought about and throw away the bad ones. It's like, no, you liberals can't be in charge anymore. You've had your shot, you've had your fun, and you blew it. You had your opportunity to make America great again, and you blew it. It is time for conservatism to take the reins once again. We'll still have women's rights, although we'll discourage them from certain activities, because women are intrinsically more important than men, and therefore should be discouraged from taking certain risks. Because an entire culture can survive with only a very few men, but they still need a great many women. Because the fewer women you have, the higher risk there is of negative mutation, inbreeding, and etc., etc. Because the women are the ones who carry the mitochondrial DNA. And because when you lose a man, you're really only losing one life most of the time. There's plenty of other men around. You lose a woman, you lose one life plus the potential for great many lives. But they should still be permitted to do certain these activities, but they should be discouraged from, culturally speaking, without restricting their freedom, because this is America, bitch. We're supposed to respect freedom. Many other positive changes. We'll just be getting rid of, like, the way I see it, we should get rid of the abortions, like, completely. And we should tone down feminism and just let the feminists go after their pet issues of, of sexual abuse and so forth. But if they start going and being toxic again, that's when we fight back, and we fight against their freedom of speech with our freedom of speech. Conservatism needs to take back over, because liberalism has literally fucked up. Anyway, that's it for the Young Globalist today, folks. I'm out!